Welcome to This American Principal, a weekly podcast dedicated to telling the real stories of school leadership. Today's episode is personal. It's about a man who shaped a school, a community, and like so many of my fellow alumni, me. Hirt was an incredibly influential leader at North Monterey County High School in Castroville, California, where he served for nearly 30 years. To generations of Condors, he isn't just a former principal or activities director, he's a legend. And as someone who was able to serve in a cabinet position for 2 consecutive years within the ASB leadership team and worked under him on the founding board of the California Association of Student Leadership, I had the honor and privilege of working closely with good old Mr. Hirt. I realized much too later in life how lucky I was to have him as my mentor. On the surface, my senior year looked shiny and picture perfect, but what most people didn't know is that I was walking through one of the hardest seasons of my life. In the middle of all that, Mr. Hirt was the adult I could always count on, the one who gave me advice, even when I didn't want to hear it, and made sure I knew I mattered. If you ever passed through those halls, you know exactly what I mean. Yes, he knew how to plan events and activities well, but so much more than that, he believed in us as students, especially the ones who might have felt invisible. Today, we honor the leadership, heart, and everyday courage of Mr. Hirt and the countless ways in which he changed so many of our lives.
How do you pronounce your last name now? Schulman?
Schumann?
Schuman, yeah. And you have a kid in college now?
No, she went to a pre-college program 2 years before.
Wow.
She's going to college. She's a go-getter. She's nothing like me.
We just had our 50th wedding anniversary. See, I got my teaching credential in 1975 as my wife was graduating from college. We were both at UCSB. A week after school ended, we got married. Then neither of us had a job. So we lived in married student housing for the summer. And then it was a terrible time to look for a teaching job, especially in social studies. We scoured the landscape and Sandy found an opening in Monterey County. And my God, yeah, right on the beach. Greenfield, Monterey County. Oh, man, we're going to live on the beach. So I go up for the interview, and it's this dusty old farm town, and 4 days before school started, so they were desperate. So they hired me. I was there 5 years. We lived in Salinas. Even Greenfield was too small for Salinas was small enough.
Yeah.
But it was a good starting point. It was a young staff. People were coming and going all the time. It was a launching point for administrators and teachers. Not too many people stayed there very long. We could pretty much do what we wanted. It was before there were state standards. We had the Stoll bill where you had to design pre and post tests. You could design on your own and respond on how the kids did it. But it was good. It was a great way to get into
started.
the profession. Yeah. Yeah, and I was the only history teacher, so I could, I just made my curriculum, and yeah, it was fun.
How long were you there?
5 years. Yeah.
Then you came to North County as activities director?
Nope, I came as a teacher. I got into the interview, and I was like the 4th choice. I had no high school experience, but I got hired, and so I taught for 7 years and coached track and a little bit of basketball. I was an assistant track coach, distance running, with a great core of teachers and coaches like Roger O'Sullivan, John Simpson. It's like a building block structure that led me to a place where I felt pretty comfortable becoming principal. The middle school experience laid the groundwork. I had to figure out classroom management real quick to deal with middle school students. Got a handle on, budgeting my time as a teacher. And then at North County, it was a great opening staff. I helped develop a curriculum in a world history curriculum that allowed us to teach it in a way that we use kind of historiography, if you will, where we let the kids look at the evidence and draw conclusions to what they see rather than just rely on the textbook to tell them what happened. It drove the kids crazy. We got it from a high school up in Orville. A couple guys wrote a textbook up there, and our new principal, the second principal of the high school, knew about these guys. So I kind of borrowed from them, and I've worked my off in the summer before we implemented it in 83, I think it was. I had 7 great years of teaching. Then I got a little itchy. Let's see what happened. An athletic director job opened. So I've done everything at that school, but being a school counselor.
I didn't know you were AD. Was that
Yep.
before Sousa?
Yep. Yep. So I was his boss. I think, well, anyway, I got the job. Maybe Larry should have been hired instead of me, but I did a really good job. I know that.
Why do you say that?
Why do I think I did a good job?
Yeah.
Because there was some disharmony in the department, and I was able to kind of harness it all in. And a lot of the stuff I became really good at in activities, I think team building, gathering everybody up as a team and a common goal. And that year, I think I did that. It was the hardest year I had in teaching because I was half-time teacher, half-time athletic director. By
Yeah.
then, it was becoming a big job. It's even worse now where you have to be part lawyer
Yeah.
and part everything else under the sun.
Right.
But after a year, Mr. Padroni was the activities director then. He did it for 2 years,
About that.
and then he went off to Moss Landing. He started the middle school there, which was, it really was kind of sad. They converted it into middle schools without doing any infrastructure work on the school. So the 7th and 8th graders are running around and bending over under their knees to drink water out of the water fountain.
As they were elementary designed?
Yeah, and there were attempts to build a middle school. It never came to fruition. There was a change in leadership along the way in the superintendents, and it's still a mess. So then I became the activities director, and talk about not knowing what I was doing.
What year?
I became the activities director way before you got there. 88, 89. That was my first year.
Really? So by the time I
You were near the
graduated,
tail end of it.
it was at your 10-year mark because you definitely knew what you were doing by then.
Yeah, but at first it was trial and error because, as a teacher, you're in control of everything. But when you're an activities director, as I learned on the fly, you've got to delegate because you can't do it all on your own. You got to get good kids in, just like you need to get good teachers at your school. You got to train them and you got to trust them and you got to turn them loose. That's the only way it works. And if you do those things, it could be one of the most rewarding jobs in the world. And it was. I loved it.
Out of all your positions, and we'll get into how you went
Yeah.
into AP and principal, but
Yeah, probably my favorite.
my guess is that you loved being activities director the most.
Yeah. Yep. But 10 years, some people did it for a career and stayed involved with CAT until they retired. But,
Yeah.
I started to get an itch. I think I told you after I was done with my 5 years as the area coordinator, you were there when I was doing all that stuff. I decided, you know what? It felt just foreign not to be part of that and still an activities director. It felt a big letdown. And so that's when I thought, well, maybe this is the time. So that's when I applied to be assistant principal, and it was the right move. Every move I've ever made has been not necessarily a planned move, but just an intuitive move that felt good at the time.
When you look back on, why do you say it was the right move? Like,
I felt like I'd done all I wanted to do. You have to be all in to be a good activities director. And if you're not all in, it's not going to work, or really in any job, but especially with that job. You're exposed to the whole school and the whole community, everything you do, good and bad. If something's not working right or you're not totally in, it's going to show in a most public and unfortunate way.
do you think more so than the principal role?
Yeah, I would say same with principal. Yeah, exposed the same sort of way. But really a principal, well, I guess the program, the school itself, and all the moving parts is the public part of the principal's job. But the flashy big things, homecomings and, well, all the things that go part of activities. I learned my first year, people told me I did a good job, but I didn't feel like I did a good job.
Why not?
I just, because I could tell I was not, the kids who were used to Padroni, they were seniors. And now here comes this new guy. They could tell I was wet behind the ears and didn't really know what I was doing. So after that, it got a lot better.
I have a lot of fun memories of you. When I say you had a big impact on me, I mean it. Even with the kids the other day, we were talking about something and they're like, "Oh, Mom, this looks like so good. It's Mr. Hirt. Gotta make it big, do it right, give it class."
Yeah, I probably stole that from somebody too. But That's a great saying.
One of my memories of you when I heard that you went into the principal role, you'd kind of hint a little bit about
Mhm.
just stress going on and stuff, because obviously we worked so closely together. And I remember asking you, well, why don't you, have you ever thought about being principal? And you were like, no, God, no.
You may remember your senior year was a hellacious year for Carosi in the school. We had the hazing thing, and he was ready to move on. He would have been a great assistant soup in our district, but he moved to Placerville, and that opened up all the things. It took me a quarter of the next year with Jonathan and the crew for me to decide to apply. So I didn't get the job as assistant principal till October of the next year after the first quarter. We hired a really good gal to take my place who was already a teacher there. I spent a
Oh,
lot of
okay.
time helping her along,
Nice.
and yeah, actually, the most seamless move would be activities to assistant principal. As an activities director with only one assistant principal in the school, you're kind of like an assistant principal anyway. Supervising events, I was doing attendance discipline on the side. And
Really?
yeah, because we were shorthanded. There's no way a
Right.
school of 1,500 should have two administrators. It's nuts. And
Right.
now I think they got four now
No way.
for
Same
less
size?
kids. Yeah, smaller.
No.
Yep. The coordinators, back then did some discipline. They did the low key discipline. So we spread out discipline roles, but it was kind of a hot potato with money tight. It seemed like it was tight every year. It was a hot potato to add another assistant principal to the high school. You got the angry, because the elementary schools and the middle schools were understaffed. And they're going, well, why are they getting them? There was always this perception that the high school was the favored child, which was true, but it would have been a public relations nightmare to add another administrator during that
Yeah.
time.
Well,
Yeah,
so then you move over to AP. You were there for just a couple years before you
about
moved
five
into
years.
5. Okay.
So I had to go back to school. They accepted some credits I had done previously when I had started on my master's. So I got my master's at San Jose State, my administrative credential while I was as an administrator. 5 years in our district, if things are going well, when somebody retires, it creates a domino effect. So Leo St. John, who was a terrific superintendent, was there from 87 to 2003. He
Mhm.
retires. Boom. Keith Parkhurst, who was an assistant soup, became superintendent. He hires Don Padroni to be the HR guy. Now there's an
Yeah.
opening for principal, and I was ready. So I applied for that and
You'd
got the
already
job.
been running the school for quite some time.
In some ways, yeah.
So you move into the principal role and you felt good about it.
I felt good about it, and it went well most of the time. But I think you probably want to talk about some challenges.
Well, what was your favorite part? Like, what were those parts where you were like, yes, I'm glad I'm doing this?
When the school, I'm really good at organizing, especially for my job as an activities director. I'm really good at team building. I was a good teacher, and I knew good teaching techniques I could help new teachers. I really love that part of it. And the kids, I love the kids. When I retired and I had my last graduation, I thought, I really don't want it to be about, but it was a pretty touching moment
I
when the
bet.
kids, yeah, at
I
my
bet.
graduation.
What was your last graduation?
2009.
That must have been really special after contributing so many years to that school.
There's not all principals have a good relationship with the kids, but I can say that even for the kids that gave me trouble and had reason not to like me, they were at least neutral because I think most of them felt like I gave them a fair shake. I was strict and tough when I had to be. One of the problems for me was that we only had one outlet for kids that weren't working out in the high school. And that was Central Bay, which was El Camino at one time. It was a continuation high school. And the principal at the time decided he did a great job with that school. He really turned it around and made it into an alternative school with great academics and support for the kids that wasn't just a holding place. At the same time, he was restrictive about allowing us to send students there. He would frequently say, well, what are you doing at your school today? We have all these programs in place to help these guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes for the good of the order, when you have 1,500 kids, you've got to move some people on. They're maybe real way behind on credits. They may be
Yeah.
causing unsafe situations at the school, causing fights, whatever. And We didn't just
Mhm.
send everybody there, but that was a struggle. That was a
That was
frustration.
hard.
Yeah.
We also had that site that was kinda on campus for the
Independent study.
at one point, didn't North County have the highest stats for, like, Latino graduation?
I don't know.
The late
I
90s.
know I know definitely know for a while we had really good statistics. We had UC Santa Cruz there as a partner, and we had extra support from them. They had a counselor upstairs in the library that helped kids apply to college and kind of stay after them. Plus, the migrant education program helped with that. So we had all these support systems for Latino kids.
So, you get into the principal role.
Yep.
What story that you think epitomizes being a principal?
Well, first of all, when you're a principal this day and age, you never know when you're walking into work what the person, a student, staff member, member of the community, makes the decision that could throw your career upside down in a second. Yeah. Fortunately, nothing like that happened to me. I always prayed that that wouldn't happen. But one of the things, one of the tougher things was when Keith Parkhurst was sick and he couldn't continue as superintendent. He had a change in leadership. New superintendent Carolyn Post did a really good job, and I got along with her. But we hired some assistant soups, and we hired the business manager guy in 2006. I'll never forget this. Sat at a board meeting at the start of the school year, said that there was going to be plenty of money that year for raises. So flash ahead 7 months. There's no settlement. The teachers are getting pissed, and I'm caught in the crossfire. Well, anybody that's in administration's caught in the crossfire. And the teachers, some of my best friends even, decide to stage a walkout on the day of the California high school exit exam. So we have maybe 3 or 4 teachers who weren't tenured that decided they better show up to work, and a few temporary teachers,
Okay.
and we somehow made that test happen. We had all the, district office people there. We were given the tests in the gym and the library. And you know what? The test scores were good. It was amazing. The test scores were good. We always
Thank
had pretty
goodness.
good scores on the high school exit.
Did you get a heads up at all, or did you find out that
We
morning?
knew it was coming. So they were over there pretty quickly. Amazingly, we made it happen, but that was not a fun day. Then the news media shows up. Small Monterey County, small area, KSBW's there. They're there for stuff like this. Looking back, that was probably one of the worst things. And if that's the worst, you think, well, that wasn't too bad. And it really wasn't too bad.
Well, of course, you always have a handle on things.
I really wasn't that angry with the teachers. I probably leaned on the side of the teachers more on salary issues than I should have. Even though I was involved my first year as principal, they had me on the negotiating team with the management side, and I hated it. I'm a new principal, and I was gone from my job 18 days that year to be over for negotiations. By that time, we had John Simpson became my assistant principal, and it was good to have an experienced cohort. There was nobody that wanted to step up. That was a frustration. None of our young stars, teachers, wanted to step up and become an administrator in our school. And it was frustrating.
Why do you think so many people were hesitant? I know you would have encouraged all sorts of
Well, I
people.
tried to talk, several people, Jesus Galindo, Lupe Sanchez.
What do you think their hesitation was?
I don't think they wanted the pressure or it just wasn't what they envisioned. They were counselors. They both are still counselors at the school, and they like that role. For whatever reason, it's not for everybody. A lot of people are perfectly happy in their position. Kevin Martin taught over 40 years, and he was perfectly happy doing the same thing every year. I would have gone completely nuts, but
So, do you think it takes a type of person that likes new challenges?
yeah, and anybody that is thinking about it, I would always say you should try it because you don't want to regret at the end of your career that, well, what if I had done that and it had really worked out? Every time I took a risk, it worked. I never regretted it. It was always, yeah, I think I have pretty good intuition. It always worked out well. Understand, I worked my tail off to make it happen and make it work well, but and I learned a lot. If you were to ask anybody at the start of my teaching career that I would become a principal, or anybody at my high school where I went, that I'd become a high school principal, they say, you'd be about number 400 on our list. And I've told you the stories about me. I was a shy kid in high school, and that helped give me empathy for kids that weren't. I probably made me better in every role I had in education. Yeah.
Do you think because of who you were as a high schooler?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You could, as a psychologist, could probably speculate that it was my attempt to go back and make high school right since I didn't get it right the first time. I spent the next 29 years at North County trying to get it right.
I don't know if you remember this. You told me that every president, ASB president, you had this theory around the invisible kids. This is well before school shootings and things like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
were so
Poor Columbine.
rampant.
Yeah.
I don't know where you had gotten this, but this is part of what stayed with me in terms of my teaching and leadership was really paying attention to those invisible kids. You always told me, Joan, you got to watch out for these invisible kids. It's those kids that we have to worry about. And you, as student leaders, have a responsibility to represent and think about. And I don't know if you remember this, but when the hazing incident happened, I had lunch with the boy. It was so different for me. He was this young, he was so anxious. We were somehow in the principal's office. I don't know why we did lunch there. Probably should
You're
have
with
been
the
out.
kid that was the main culprit. Yeah.
No, the victim.
The victim. Oh,
Yes. You had me meet with him and I had lunch with him.
wow.
And that really stuck with me.
Well, you know what? I got to credit you. And most of the student leaders I had, you guys were wise beyond your years because a lot of student leaders, if you're teenagers, you're dealing with all the stuff that goes along with being a teenager. And it's really hard to get teenagers out of their little shell and to look at the big picture and to look for those invisible
Yeah.
kids. So I really credit you
Yeah.
for doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was the free lunch that you had. I was always up for a free lunch.
No,
I was a part of that group that started the peer
you're
tutoring, peer
right. Yep.
counseling. I remembered spending time with these kids that were so different from me. They were so introverted and they really struggled to communicate. I remember really having to dig deep in my toolkit to try to find ways to engage with them. There was one girl that I was doing peer counseling with, and I remember being like, okay, well, let's go for a walk because she did not want to talk. She didn't want to be in a room. So we just walked around the campus, did loops around the perimeter because that was the only way she could feel comfortable talking.
Uh-huh.
I just wonder where that came from, if it came from your own personal experience. I'm sure that stayed with you as a principal, is
Mhm.
just always looking out for those kids that aren't connected to the social scene or the extracurriculars in any way. And I don't know if you know, but there's all this research around belonging and how it's the most important thing. How did you know that back 30 years ago before anybody was talking about it?
Yeah, it's just not rocket science. I'm sure part of it is just from my own experience too. Yeah.
What would be your advice to like people who are considering moving into principal or maybe are new to the role?
I would say know your strengths. Where you're not as strong, try to backfill people into those spots that can help you in those places you're not as strong. Sometimes you don't know if you're cut out for it. The good news about me waiting till I was 50, I think I knew I was cut out for it because I'd had, as I said, that career building blocks all along the way. I would say if you're thinking about doing it, get into positions that are leadership positions in the school, even if you don't end up being a principal at that school, that could give you some practice in leadership, either as an activities director, a department chair, a mentor teacher. Secondary roles kind of prepares you for it. Whereas if you just go straight from the classroom to principal or as an assistant principal, it could be daunting and you could be unsuccessful if you haven't had some leadership experience. So know yourself, get good people underneath you, be open to positions that may not be something you want to do permanently, but will give you preparation for that role.
Or how do you know if you're cut out for it?
You're not going to know really until you engage in it, or unless you've had some of those positions along the way. If you have confidence and if you do well in those introductory leadership positions, then you'll be able to tell. If you say, yeah, and I don't like the weight of this on me, I don't want to be in charge of other adults, it's too stressful. I just want to be work with kids. Then it's probably not for you, and there's some people that find out the hard way.
If you go back to that story and thinking about what got you through, I
You
mean,
mean the strike, the 1 day
the
strike?
strike. Do you think that would have gone over had you been second year in the role? Didn't have
Yeah.
any relationships with those teachers?
If I was at a different school,
How do you think your prior relationships with the staff supported your success as a principal?
I think it had a lot to do with it. I can remember my first speech as principal. I summarized all of the characteristics and the great traits that other principals had brought to the high school. Walt Holmes, culture. He knew every kid's name, which I never did. Marlene Davis, curriculum. She ramped up the curriculum. That wasn't Walt's strong suit. Dennis Croce, innovation. Don Pedroni, kind of smooth things over. Dennis could ruffle feathers.
Ability.
Yeah, stability. Because Dennis could ruffle feathers. I love the guy, but he could rub you the wrong way. But Don helped smooth that over, and then there was me. I was different than Don and different than all of them, but
What do you think you brought?
not that any of them didn't bring this. But I think uh, credibility. I was well known in the district. I think I was trusted. A level of integrity. I don't think I ever made a decision that was not on the up and up. I was always honest when I didn't hire somebody from within for a position they had applied for.
So
I
you
just,
brought transparency.
yeah, I like to think I did. So,
You had such strong relationships with all the kids and the families. I'm sure that came through.
yeah, I've had kids come up to me that were in that last graduating class and say pretty nice things to me as principal. Well, we really miss you, mister,
Yeah.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
How is that for you now? You were in such a spotlight and such a public view for so long.
That last year was a rough year. I was running out of gas, and the late nights, there's only two administrators. Yeah, it was time. It was time. It was not a smooth transition to retirement.
Do you miss, though, being like the head of such a community? I mean, it's a pretty big community leadership position.
Yeah, there are a lot of parts of it I missed. I missed the kids and the staff. When you retire, you lose all those casual daily occurrences and relationships. They're not necessarily maybe your best friends, but when you don't see them at all, that was tough. It's like going on the autobahn at 100 miles an hour and then slamming on the brakes and then you're walking and you just stop. So it was hard. It was not easy.
The transition.
Yeah. Yeah, then I did some weird stuff. Mr. Haggio and I, we were hired by the probation department to work as officers in lockdown probation. Kids that were locked up.
Like schooling with.
We weren't teachers. We were just security, you would say, or
No.
yeah, keep track of them, make sure they're behaving. But I tried to use the times often to talk to some of these kids, and some of them were former North County kids.
Right. Yes.
That knew me and knew him, or from families that I knew. I only did that a couple of years.
So you've been retired now for over a decade.
16 years.
16 years. Oh my gosh. If we have people listening who are retiring as a principal, what would be your advice for them?
You got to listen to your body and listen to your heart and act on it, because it's not a job you can do part way. If you're not feeling completely up to it, then you have to make the smart decision for your health. And
Is that why you finished it 1 year shy of 30 years
well, I was 34 years actually in
in education?
in education. I could have made a little more in retirement if I'd stuck around. 62 is the magic number, in case you didn't know.
What were you at?
I was 50. I was going to be 59.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you wanted to say?
One other challenge was the changing demographics of the high school. When they built Morro Coho, not only that, but all over California, the demographics of the state have changed drastically. When I started at North County, it was 2/3 white and about a third Latino. Most of the Latinos were well integrated in American society. They were old school Castroville families, or other parts of North County. As the years went on, by the time I was a principal, even before, it was flipped the other way. It was about a 2/3 Latino and 1/3 white. The transition was tough for some staff members. We certainly tried to hire staff that reflected on the population we had coming in, so that they could better understand what was going on. But I made it a mission. It was a mission of mine as principal to make that happen smoothly, and to not let racism and bigotry get in the way of students feeling welcome there. So every year, when Cinco de Mayo and Mexican Independence Day came around, it was tense on campus, because not all white kids wanted to let that celebration happen. They felt it was their duty to infringe upon that celebration either by taunting or waving a flag, and they would never wear an American flag until that day to kind of taunt the Latino kids. And so I didn't put up with that. I was strict, and I'm surprised I didn't get more complaints from parents because I wouldn't tolerate the nonsense that some of these people had to try to interfere with what I considered legitimate celebration for two-thirds of our student body. Again, welcoming, making everyone feel welcome. So that was
Mhm.
an incredible challenge.
Yeah.
The fact that I wasn't Latino, sometimes became an issue. And I think the school board and a lot of the community were hoping to get, and I was hoping to get an assistant principal that maybe was a person that could bring more perspective to my leadership as well.
Mhm.
But I couldn't get him to step up.
So that would be something you really encourage young Latino
Mhm.
educators to consider going into administration.
There's a former North County student who's a Latino who's a superintendent in the Central Valley now. There are leaders out there. They just haven't been, they're not as homegrown as we would like to have gotten them. Um, I have another change that happened I was woefully unaware of over my years, and that was, sexual identity and,
Right.
gay students on campus. And hired a terrific English teacher maybe just right after you left, who was
Okay.
gay and started a
You
support group on campus and was
Uh-huh.
a strong advocate and was pushing for more support in things that should have been happening. At first, I was hesitant because I didn't really know what the reaction of the community would be. Teachers were especially the younger teachers, were pretty adamant about supporting gay rights. And at the time I was principal, there was the whole gay marriage issue hadn't been decided yet. So we would have debates between different teachers that had different views on this. And it was a hot potato because there were people of religious beliefs, pretty much people that had maybe strict religious beliefs that it was wrong, were debating against some progressive teachers on campus that felt like it was the right thing to do. And of course, we're way far down the line, except if you have an administration that's trying to turn it all backwards and back up 50 years, who knows?
What would be some advice that you would give to administrators when you don't really know where your state or where the laws are going to land? What's your advice to them, especially at that secondary ed level?
Yeah, you have to know your community, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do the right thing. You need to talk to your superintendent and your assistant superintendent if you're the principal, if you're about to embark on the right thing to do, but perhaps something that's going to cause a disruption or community anger, so that you can maybe help guide you in creating this progress in a way that, well, at least you have the back of your bosses. So I would say, be transparent with your bosses, listen to the people that are pushing for the change, and if it seems like the right thing to do, you try to make that happen, even with the discomfort it might bring. When you're going to get heat, it's not comfortable to get that heat, even if you know you're in the right. It makes it easier if you know you're right.
I was going to ask you what the most rewarding part of your career in education has been. I mean, I guess it's reconnecting with super fun alumni.
It is. It is pretty fun. Yeah. That's why I have, 1,700 friends on Facebook.
Well, it was a pretty special time, I remember. And I mean, I'm going to choke up, but I just, with everything that was going on with me, when I ended up learning so much about,
Mhm.
working with tough kids and then learning about like risk factors and protective factors. Every time we talk about like building resiliency and how it's all about close relationships with like a safe adult. And I just think, where would I have been without Mr. Hurt? Because, I think
Gonna get me
one
going
thing
here.
I just think you really helped me to see what a good man is. And God, if I hadn't have had that, who knows what would have happened. I'm just so glad I had a different example to look to. I mean, it was just during such a crazy time in my life and such an important time in a kid's life as your teenage years.
The fact that you and your sisters have excelled, it's just an
Yeah.
amazing thing. And credit to your mom. My God, I don't know
Yeah.
how she did it.
I don't know either.
Somewhere you had resiliency built
Yeah.
into you and the capacity to thrive even in dire circumstances.
But, it really is that caring adult. And now we give talks and keynotes all about the importance of belonging. It's the relationship and being seen, I think, that makes or breaks kids' lives. And it just has such an impact on everybody's future.
All right, we need to stay in touch. You just tell me when you're
My
available.
little monthly mentoring. I love it. Again, so
Oh,
much.
you're welcome, Joan. You just made my day and my year, maybe even. I don't know.
Thanks for listening to This American Principle. If today's story resonated with you, share this podcast with a colleague, a friend, or anyone who needs a reminder of just how hard and how vital school leadership really is. And if you've got a story of your own, head over to www.leadingforlearning.com to share your experience. This isn't just a podcast, it's a community. Together, we are lifting up the voices of the people who make schools work. Until next time, keep leading with courage, clarity, and heart.